Hello, welcome to the Marriage Underdogs Radio Show, and I'm your host, Chris A. Matthews, and I have a phenomenal guest today with us. I would like to introduce you to Dr. Gigi Hamilton. How you doing, Dr. Gigi?
Hey, how are you?
I am doing well. I am so excited to have you on our show. You are a phenomenal clinician out of Charlotte, North Carolina. You've been practicing for over 30 years. Can't believe that. That is just great.
Yes.
You provide executive coaching. You also own your own therapy practice. You manage clinicians at that practice as well as provide direct care. I'm just glad to have you here because you also have a new book out we're going to talk about as well.
Okay, I
And,
do. Thank you.
and for our listeners, we're going to focus this interview around women, wives, professionals, mothers, females who are in a position of trying to maintain the superwoman persona. And the name of your book that we're going to dive deep into, and the focus of the interview, is going to be for these women, for women listening, mothers, daughters, professionals who feel the need to have to be everything for everybody. And in the process, they forget about the most important person, which is themselves. So my first question to you, Gigi, talk about what inspired you to write your book, Cape Escape, Redefining Your Superpowers.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. I'm gonna shameless plug and show you the book because having the cape on the actual cover was really important. And quite honestly, you would think the extensive experience that I have in working with executives and women's, in the C-suite and just women that are professionals every day would have been the motivation. But it wasn't that. It was in January, there was a national news article that came out, and there was a professor. No, she wasn't a professor. She was working in administration at a college, and she took her own life. And I didn't know her. My heart goes out to her and her family, but it just stuck with me because, it just felt like she struggled with feeling like there was no other way out. And in my own personal and professional life since 2019, I've had three other experiences where there were people who died at their own hands and are no longer here. And that really meant a lot to me. My book is not about suicide, but I did do a dedication to those that, meant so much to me in this book. It really is about the way we have been designed based on our childhood up until present day to take on this notion that we are supposed to be able to do it all. And so we wear all of these capes. And honestly, for quite some time, we actually do it well until we can't. And so there comes a point where this intersection happens, and then we start to suffer, and we suffer in silence. And that's when the struggle and the difficulties start to begin. It's like you're cracking, at the seams. And so you're just not at that 100% anymore. And so what happens is you often just stay in that space and you just kind of start. There's a chapter I have in the book that talks about your cape being tattered. And so that's what happens, right? It starts to tear at the seams and you just start to feel the impact of that. So that was really the motivation for me writing the book. And on the back end of that, the other part of the book, the latter part talks about how do you redefine your own life so that you can get a better grasp of that, so that you can handle this better, and so that really you can live life on your own terms, despite what society expects of you.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to dive further because when you look at the title of our show, Marriage Underdogs, we tend to forget that partners bring all of themselves into a relationship. You don't pick and choose the pieces of yourself you bring into that relationship. And for a lot of the couples that I counsel, I predominantly work with heterosexual couples. I find the women to be so strong, and they will talk about how they may have came from an environment where they were forced to be resilient, whether it be a single parent household, or it may be a household full of abuse, or they didn't have a good role model as a father to show them that they don't have to be it all, right? Or they might have witnessed the single parent mother who ingrained in them that they had to be everybody for everybody, right? And they pass along that torch. And I bring this up because in your book and in the work you do, just speaking with women, I know you work with men and women, but if we focus on our women, right, our ladies, our mothers, our daughters, our sisters, if we look at that population, talk about the self-talk, right? So what are your clients telling themselves that makes them feel like they have to wear the cape?
Sure. Well, I think one of the reasons putting this in the book was so important was to kind of get a compilation of all that we do in therapy sessions to help people get it, to help them have a much deeper grasp of what's really happening. So in my second chapter, I think I talk a lot about going back to our childhoods, right? And childhood is so important because I always say that when I have a new client come in, I talk about, their 7-year-old selves and how we're all 7-year-olds running around with grown up clothes, trying to act like we have it figured out. But coming to therapy, coming to meet with someone with coaching, you're learning how to then reconcile the wounds that have happened, the struggles that have happened over and the beliefs that need to be unlearned that have happened from your childhood. So it starts there in what we learned from our families, what we saw from our friends, what we got vicariously through television. All those things shaped how we saw ourselves and what we believed. This is called the cape escape because it takes the metaphor of superheroes. Superheroes in our world speaks to invincibility. It speaks to an additional power that we don't necessarily have naturally. So over time, women are taught that's who you're supposed to be. That's how you're supposed to show up in the world. So you tell us what to do, and we're going to do it, and we're going to do it well. Right. So it develops over time, and that's what we stick with, and we try to do it. And I think for a while we can until we can't.
Hmm. And that goes to the influence that led you to write the book. You spoke about I want to say it was a, a university professional. She was either the dean, if I'm not mistaken, or chancellor
I
or
think
vice
assistant
chancellor,
vice president.
assistant
Yeah.
vice president.
Mhm.
And I recall the article that you're speaking of because she had written letters to friends or colleagues
Mhm.
when this happened. So one of the colleagues was being interviewed, and she
Mm.
had also had an email that she wrote to her boss or the person over her and said in that email, like, hey, this is too much. And it was dismissed. Right. So talk about how women can have their voices heard when it becomes too much. Because and this question is rooted in the sense that, like, as a husband, we may not know that our wives are going through something like that, right? We may not know.
Sure. Yeah. So I ended up writing my dissertation on emotional intelligence and the impact it has in the workplace for leaders, for women leaders in particular. And I did a qualitative study, so I interviewed women in the banking industry. And what's really important about that is when you think about emotional intelligence, there's 4 prongs to it, and it's what we perceive, it's how we use information for our emotions, it's how we understand it, and it's also how we manage it. And there's this unspoken rule, like in organizations, you have the written culture and you have the lived culture. So the lived culture really talks about women not being able to use their emotion. They're not able to actively get it out and say how they're truly feeling and showing that emotion without it being a punitive or a negative, connotation to it. So in that respect, they're dismissed quite a bit, often not respected for the, information that they're displaying. So they learn very early on, I can't show up like that.
Mm.
Right. Um, and ironically, for people of color, for women of color, the other thing is the biggest component of our emotions. We have to focus, and I think this is really for any woman, we have to manage our emotions. That's what we have to spend our energy doing. It's managing it so we don't appear as the angry person, as the woman who's always, too emotional and we can't trust her decisions and things like that.
So what I'm really hearing you say, Gigi, is that as a husband who's listening to you speak about the research you've conducted, it would be my job and husbands' jobs and employers' jobs as well to create a safe space so women can show up with their emotions and not feel judged or chastised for it.
Yes, and the other part, and this isn't in my book, but you're gonna have me go down the couples the couples lane and talk about just understanding your spouse to the point that you get how each of you show up. For example, I'm right brain, which is the emotional person, right? So you need to know which one you are. Left brain is highly logical. So when you're getting into a point where you're trying to have a conversation and it starts to become conflictual, it's because the person that's emoting from an emotional space, in order for them to come down, they need to get the information out. More often than not, when you're talking to the logical person and you just come at them from an emotional standpoint, you bring them up now to fight, flight, or freeze. So now you're both here and you can't get any resolution in the conversation. So it's more important for the person who's highly upset to say, look, I'm upset about something. This is what I really want to talk to you about. Can we talk about it in an hour? So now that gives the logical person the opportunity to have the place and to process what's about to happen and to be prepared to begin to listen to what's going on. And it also gives the emotional person the ability to learn how to come down from fight, flight, or freeze and being so upset. And you really need to practice this as a couple because you need to know how long it takes for you to come down from your, heightened state. I used to think for me it was about a good hour, but quite honestly, I am much better after I sleep. I need to
Mm.
sleep, and when I wake up, I see the world completely different from I switch my brain is switched to logical and I just see the situation so much differently. So we all need to know how long it takes for us to switch over. Now, that doesn't mean go to bed mad,
Yeah.
right? That means let's have the conversation and I love you. I'm feeling some kind of way about this because that's still real. But we have to think about how we still nurture each other and love toward each other so that we're not going apart.
Yeah, and what you're describing reminds me of a clip that Brene Brown was recorded speaking on, and we have this notion of relationships are 50-50, but
Yeah,
she was articulating how your partner may come in and only have 5% that day,
that's
and you
right.
pick up 90, or vice versa. You might have 10% and they have to pick up 95. That's my math, but y'all get what I'm saying, right? Or you
Yeah.
might come in with 10 and they got to have 90. So
Hmm.
it's important from what I'm hearing you say, you have to know yourself well enough to then communicate that to your partner.
And even if you don't know the number per se, it's easy to say, I am not in a good place. I don't even know what I need right now. Can I have a minute? I'd love to talk about it, but I just need to process for a minute, or I just need to go to bed. I just need to have a moment because I can't even tell you what I need.
And it's okay not to know. I
Yeah.
think that's the part that your book really highlights in terms of the Kate. It's okay not to get it right. Talk
Yes.
about how husbands, how partners, how professionals can produce that space to make it comfortable enough for women to take the cape off.
Hmm. It's almost like having that extra awareness, knowing that you come into the relationship carrying too much already. because you drank the Kool-Aid. You already started this process a long time ago. So by the time you come into therapy as a woman, I was literally just on a session yesterday, and my client, the first thing out of her mouth was, "I'm tired." And I said, when you say you're tired, we're not talking about physical exhaustion, right? So making a safe space for people to be able to talk about being tired to a point where it's almost beyond physical, exhaustion. It's this longitudinal, I can't say that word, this longevity, this thing that's happened over time where you just have this pile up of all these capes that you're wearing, but also you're having this weight that you can't seem to shake. And it's very prevalent in women of color.
Yeah. And, it also seems like to be able to create a safe space, I'm hearing the awareness piece, but it doesn't need to be a punitive response. If your partner or employee or what have you tells you, "Hey, this is where I'm at," and then they're penalized for that feeling, or they're penalized for
Yeah.
being tired, they're penalized for being burnt out, they're penalized for being overworked, then they're not going to express that to you, right?
Right. Absolutely. And that goes back to your emotional intelligence. If I can't trust you, I'm not going to let you know what's truly going on. Right. So when I think about talking about the level of stress someone is experiencing, I ask them to uh, relate that to me as it relates to another person's weight. How much extra weight are you carrying? Sometimes people are saying they're carrying a whole nother person, right? So if you already know as a spouse that it's heavy for them today, you need to have an awareness of what their love languages are. I mean, not this, even asking, what do you need sometimes is too much. I don't even have that to give some days, that's how it feels. So just understanding what their love languages are. Maybe it's acts of service. So you going and washing the dishes or cooking dinner that day, just those little acts of kindness can help take some of that weight off that cake. Now, that's difficult in the workplace though, because at the end of the day, the job has to be done, right? So sometimes you don't always have that luxury to say, you individual person, I understand that you're stressed, so let me take all of this work off your plate. You don't have that luxury all the time.
Well, that's what makes the executive coaching you do so powerful, because
Yeah.
we've spoken, full transparency, we've spoken several times prior to this podcast. You and I have developed good friendship, especially as a colleague. And through our dialogue, Gigi, I can recall countless times how, and just too, I met you by way of being a client of yours, right? Like I've worked with you from the coaching level as
Mhm.
being someone that hired your services. And what I remember about going through the coaching with you, you made sure to not just focus on one area. I think as business professionals, we're so focused on profit, make money, market,
Mhm.
etc.
Mhm.
But you did a good job of looking at the whole person, right?
Yes. Mhm.
We will bring in areas of one part of our life into another part. So it's like a puzzle. All the pieces connect. They don't
Yes.
not touch at some point, right? But my question then is, talk about how you help those professionals, business owners, even other therapists that you've coached and counseled. Talk about how you help them acknowledge how they're bringing other areas of their life that aren't fixed and need to
Sure.
into
Well,
the
and yeah, it's interesting you say that because they really do come with this narrow focus. I need you to coach me. I need some help. I need my business to grow, right? And they have no expectation that I see the world as this legged stool, right? And so it's you, if one of those are off balance, the stool is in balance. So it's a matter of, we have to look at your physical, emotional, financial, your social, your spiritual, whatever that may be for you, that are your strengths, your areas that keep you together. we have to make sure from a holistic perspective that all of those areas are strong and working together in tandem. And more often than not, they're not. And as it relates to clinicians, I teach at Northwestern University, and I teach students in the classes that I do have, they're getting extra information because I teach them how to become consultants in addition to clinicians. It's not naturally taught in our curriculum, right? And so I was actually taught that in my program. It was the last time they offered this class, and it was the best class I had. So I came out of school already knowing how to be a consultant as well as a clinician. It just broadened the way you see the world. So for clinicians who are trying to grow their business, you have to really make this paradigm shift, because what we're taught and how we're supposed to serve is really conducive to just this narrow way of providing services, whereas we actually are subject matter experts. We get to take our areas of passion and help people on a macro level. And there's so many different ways you can do that. So that's what I help people do, and learn how to take those areas so that they can monetize them, so that they can live a comfortable life.
Right.
Yeah.
And those areas intersect. If
Mhm.
like I was working with a couple, and the male partner, he's a business owner, and he said, Chris, when business is good, money's flowing, I'm happier at home, I'm more patient with my wife, I'm even more in tune with the kids. When business is bad and I'm struggling to make payroll, I'm
Mhm.
snapping with the kids, I'm not
Yeah.
affectionate with my wife, and I'm usually angry. Talk about how professionals, how mothers, how any person essentially can balance that out.
Sure. So one of the things that I think is a misnomer when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and this, climb to self-actualization. I think there's this notion that once we get to the self-actualized place, that's where we live. However, COVID was the perfect example of how many of us ended up straddling the hierarchy, right? People lost their jobs. People were afraid of dying because of the actual people were dying, right? So now you're worried about basic needs as well as, hierarchy. You just kind of went down the rungs of the ladder, and you were kind of stuck between two places. And I don't think it was almost like we were doing this, we're like trying to hang on in two different worlds and an epidemic. So that was really interesting. And I think what happens even in our professional careers, sometimes we get knocked back down to our basic needs, or at least, where we're not getting our needs met, but we're still trying to self-actualize. And so it's very incongruent. So as a clinician or even as a coach, we need to be able to see that in you to help you figure out how to get that balance again.
Yes. So what I mean he say is the big piece looks like balance, being able to manage a healthy homeostasis. And a lot of the work you do is that.
Yeah. And that's not even constant. That's an ongoing battle, right? I think balance is something, can we get that for the day, right? Because if you're wearing all these capes, because you're still going to have a lot of capes, what can you do that day to give you a sense of, I don't even want to say control, but being in the driver's seat of what's going on? Some days you won't have that. Have little kids, like when you got 5 and 3 and 4 year olds around the house, you don't have much control over anything other than just, making them safe and getting them through the day and falling in that bed by 10 o'clock at night, right? So it really does vary. And we talk about work-life balance so much, and really it's attainable, but it's attainable in moments, in my opinion.
Gigi, you putting on a master class for not only women but men as well who wear the cape. And
Yes.
uh, as we close out, talk to our listeners about where they can get your book and
Mhm.
your services.
Absolutely. So my website is drgg.com. And for the master class, just follow me on Instagram at Dr. Gigi Hamilton. And for the book, The Cape Escape, it's on Amazon, and you can just look it up by the title or look it up by my name, Dr. Gigi Hamilton. And yeah, there's information that's coming up for the masterclass. I'm actually only taking a small group of people to do this masterclass. So I'm going to send up, create a small sign up sheet soon, actually. So, because I really want to do it, I want to do it sooner than later. But I really only want a select few people to be in the class so that we really can do some deep diving in the process.
Gigi, I know all the people who sign up will be transformed by your services. I feel
Yeah.
like the Hair Club for Men commercial. Not only am I the president, but I'm a user too. Because I use
Mhm.
your services during a trying time in my personal and professional life, and I was able to navigate things with your help. So,
Mhm.
I can vouch for what you do,
Yeah.
and just thankful you were able to take time out of your schedule to share with us some tips and tools. And just the biggest thing I recall from our interview right now that I want to highlight and echo when you said that, how do we just look at today? The presence
Yes.
of not trying to solve everything right now. How do we
Yes.
just manage today? What does tomorrow look like? What does the week look like? What does the month look like? And when you said that, I just believe that's going to be so powerful for all our listeners. Uh,
It is. I mean, every day we wake up, it's a gift, but when we talk about the present as a present, it's a gift to us. And we get those moments, sometimes life gets so hard and all you have is just being able to take that next step. That's when the minutes start, you start to feel the minutes, if you lost someone really close and dear to you and you're in the grieving process, the world just kind of shuts out. We almost have to be able to live in that present space sometimes so intentionally that that's how we get to a place where we can have this mindful place where we can shut the world out for what we need.
nice. Yeah, everything you've spoken today is valuable. Dr. Gigi Hamilton,
Mhm.
hope to have you back on again.
Thank you.
And you've just been a blessing to our listeners. I'll make sure that the website, all the information is in the notes. And for
Okay.
those that are listening without watching the video, Dr. Gigi Hamilton, and Google it. Go to Amazon, get the book. Renowned speaker, renowned therapist, renowned executive coach. I've been in the business 30 years and don't even look a day over 30. So
Mhm.
thank you, Dr. G. And
Mhm. Although it's really difficult to say longitudinal. That's a hard word to say. Don't try to say that in an interview, people.
no,
Jeez.
hey, everything you dished out, I'm sure that if we can't say longitudinal, you can say healing,
It's like,
and the way you
mhm.
say healing through your services is valuable. So we
That's right.
appreciate
Yeah.
it. For those that have been listening, my name is Chris A. Matthews. You've tuned into the Marriage Underdogs Radio Show. We drop a new episode every Tuesday at 10 a.m. on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Look forward to being with you guys again next week. Once again, thank you, Dr. Gigi, and
Thank you.
we'll be back next week.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone. I hope to hear from you soon.